Any one of these is the end of our species.
There is something deeply disturbing about the way Silo finally explains why the underground world exists. For 3 seasons, we've been told the same basic story. The outside is deadly, humanity destroyed itself, and the silos were built to preserve what was left. But episode 8 changes the meaning of that entire history. Because Stenson wasn't simply a billionaire preparing for an apocalypse, he was watching humanity develop technology that could make extinction almost impossible to stop. And the most terrifying part is this. Stenson may have been right about the world ending, but the plan he created to save humanity may have become part of the nightmare itself. And that's the real revelation hiding inside gray goo. The silos weren't originally conceived as prisons. They weren't built because someone suddenly woke up one morning and decided humanity needed to live underground. They were designed as a contingency plan for the end of civilization. Stenson and Senator Thurman were preparing for a world where humanity could no longer guarantee its own survival. But once you understand what Stenson was actually afraid of, the entire structure of the silo system becomes much more sinister. Because he wasn't preparing for one specific apocalypse, he was preparing for the possibility that humanity would eventually invent something it could no longer control. And that something was nanotechnology. Stenson explains that nuclear war, pandemics, climate catastrophe, artificial intelligence, even an asteroid strike could potentially end civilization. But nanotechnology terrified him for a completely different reason. It could be microscopic, difficult to detect, incredibly powerful, and eventually cheap enough that a single person could potentially weaponize it. The episode connects that fear directly to the mysterious cloud that destroyed Charlotte's mission. What looked like another unexplained disaster was actually evidence of a much more terrifying technological arms race. The nanoweapon had already escaped the realm of theory. It was being developed and deployed. And this is where Stenson's plan starts to look almost reasonable. That's what makes him dangerous. He isn't standing there laughing about destroying the world. He genuinely believes he's saving it. He has enough money to build almost anything.
Is spent on this.
But it's my money. Not yours, not the taxpayers, mine.
Access to information most governments don't have, and the resources to prepare for scenarios that ordinary people would dismiss as paranoia. He looks at humanity and sees a species creating increasingly powerful weapons, while assuming somebody else will always be responsible enough to control them. So he builds the silos, 50 of them, not one giant bunker where the world's richest people can hide. 50 separate underground societies designed to preserve enough human life and knowledge that civilization could eventually restart. The project is enormous, deliberate, and carefully engineered. The silos are meant to become humanity's backup system. But here's where I think the show is setting up something much darker. Stenson planned for the apocalypse. He did not necessarily understand what the apocalypse would become. And that's an enormous difference, because if nanotechnology caused the surface catastrophe, then everything we've seen inside the silos becomes a consequence of Stenson's attempt to survive it. The rules, the isolation, the suppression of history, the control over information, the cleaning ritual, the mysterious safeguard system.
We do not know why we are here. We do not know who built the silo.
All of it exists inside a civilization that was deliberately designed to survive an extinction event. But survival came with a price. Humanity couldn't simply be placed underground and told the truth. They had to be controlled. They had to be prevented from leaving. They had to be prevented from destroying their own silo. And most importantly, they had to be prevented from discovering exactly what happened before they were born. That's the part Stenson's explanation doesn't fully answer. He explains why the silos were built. He doesn't explain why the people living inside them were stripped of their history. He doesn't explain why the system needs such extreme psychological control. And he certainly doesn't explain why one silo can apparently be sacrificed if necessary. That's why I don't believe episode 8 has actually finished explaining the silo mystery. It has only explained the first layer, and Juliet is now standing directly on top of the second layer. Because while Helen and Daniel are learning why Stenson built the silos, Juliet is discovering what those silos became. That's a completely different story. Stenson imagined the silos as humanity's insurance policy. But somewhere between the construction of those enormous underground chambers and the world Juliet was born into, that insurance policy transformed into a system of control. People forgot the old world. They forgot why they were underground. They forgot how the silos were connected. Eventually, the people inside the system started treating the rules as natural law. And then Juliet came along. That's why she's so dangerous. Juliet isn't dangerous because she's physically stronger than everyone else. She's dangerous because she keeps asking questions the system was designed to prevent people from asking. What's outside? Why can't we leave? Why does cleaning kill people? Why are there other silos? Why is Silo 1 different? What is Safeguard? And now the biggest question of all, what actually happened to the world? Episode 8 gives us an answer that sounds simple. Nanotechnology. But I don't think the show is going to leave it there. Because Grey Goo is not just a cool name for the apocalypse. It represents the nightmare Stenson has been describing from the beginning. Technology becoming capable of replicating or spreading beyond human control until it consumes everything. And if that technology is responsible for the poisoned surface, then the outside isn't simply a radioactive wasteland. It could be something far more complicated. A world contaminated by a technological weapon. A world where the danger isn't necessarily visible. A world where the people inside the silos may have been lied to about what is actually killing them. And suddenly Juliet's survival becomes even more important. Because Juliet has already done something the silo system told everyone was impossible. She went outside. She survived. She reached another silo. And now Lucas and Kennedy have reached Silo 17 while carrying information about Safeguard that could potentially save everyone in Silo 18. Episode 8 confirms that Kennedy discovers how Silo 17's poison system was sealed, while Juliet's people are simultaneously trying to find the equivalent mechanism in their own silo. That's not a coincidence. The story is now bringing the two timelines together. The people who built the silos believed they were creating humanity's future. The people living inside those silos are now discovering that the system designed to protect them can also kill them. And Juliet is trapped in the middle. That's why her arrest at the end of the episode matters so much. Juliet deliberately sacrifices her freedom so Shirley can continue the mission. She understands that stopping Safeguard is more important than keeping herself safe. But the irony is incredible. The woman who spent her entire life trapped inside a system designed to preserve humanity is now willing to sacrifice herself to stop that same system from killing the people it's supposed to protect. That's the real evolution of Juliet's story. She isn't trying to escape the silo anymore. She's trying to break the machine. And I think this is where Stenson's legacy becomes the central mystery of the final episodes. Because maybe Stenson wasn't the villain. Maybe he really did save humanity. Maybe without him, there would be no humanity left at all. But that doesn't mean his creation was morally right. A man can save the human species and still create a world where humans aren't free. And that's exactly what makes Stenson's plan so terrifying. He looked at the future and decided humanity couldn't be trusted to survive it on its own. So he built a system that would survive for humanity. The question is whether that system eventually decided that humanity itself was the problem. And if that's what happened, then the greatest twist in Silo isn't that Stenson predicted the apocalypse. It's that he may have created a world where surviving the apocalypse became almost as terrifying as the apocalypse itself. Because the silos survived, humanity survived. But Juliet is now discovering the price they paid. And if Safeguard is finally stopped, the next question won't be whether humanity can survive underground. It will be whether humanity can survive without the system that was built to control its survival.